Good evening and welcome to the August 9 meeting of the Ann Arbor City Council. If you're able, please rise and join us for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would our clerk please call the roll of council?
Councilmember Calasapathy?
Here.
Councilmember Bannister?
Here.
Councilmember Westfall? Here. Councilmember Lum? Councilmember Grand?
Here.
Councilmember Ackerman? Mayor Taylor?
Here.
Councilmember Eaton?
Here.
Councilmember Crapo? Councilmember Warpowski? Councilmember Smith?
Present.
We have a quorum.
May I have a motion, please, to approve the agenda? Moved by Councilmember Lum, second by Councilmember Grand. Discussion of the agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The agenda is approved. We have.
Excuse me, I want to pull out 2 items.
Are these from the consent agenda?
Yes.
We will do that at the consent, if that's all right. Thank you. Do you have communications today from our city administrator?
None.
We have no introductions today, and so we come to public comment reserve time. Public comment reserve time is an opportunity for members of the public to speak to council and the community about matters of municipal interest. To speak at public comment reserve time, one needs to have signed up in advance by contacting our city clerk. Speakers have 3 minutes in which to speak, so please pay close attention to the time clock. As a matter of courtesy, we may have only one person speaking at a time. And finally, if you require assistance in speaking before council, we'd be delighted to provide it to you. Our first speaker today is Gay McGregor.
Thank you for the opportunity to comment. My name is Gay McGregor, and I'm the Vice President of the Homeowners Association at 111 North Ashley, formerly known as Ashley Terrace. Our association represents owners of 99 residential units at the corner of Ashley and Huron Streets. We enthusiastically support the restoration of two-way traffic on First and Ashley Streets and Huron Street improvement projects. On June 6th, the DDA held a meeting for the occupants of our building, and about 30 residents attended. I will tell you, many of the residents were very skeptical about these projects, but after they heard the design team talk about the goals and the project and the various aspects of it, and had the opportunity to comment, people walked away from that meeting excited about these projects. We believe that the key design elements of the projects, like improving lighting and crosswalks, traffic calming measures on like street parking, and the protected bike lane will greatly improve the walkability of our area and encourage new investment. Currently, none of the streets near our building are very pedestrian friendly or very attractive. Most importantly, we believe that the proposed changes will improve safety for both pedestrians and drivers and bikers. And I'd like to give just one example. One of the biggest complaints of the residents of our building is the ability to turn left onto Huron Street out of our parking garage. If you want to go north, that's really the way most residents proceed, and going south to try to go north by turning right, you end up going several blocks out of your way. I think that by having First Street be a two-way street, it will reduce the number of left-hand turns out of our building and improve the egress from our parking garage and also from the Flagstar parking lot, which also empties onto Huron. On August 3rd, the DDA again held a meeting for residents of our building and board members to review the revisions on the plan and to see what they had done about our comments. We had given the team specific comments about the egress from our parking garage, as well as the loading zones near our building, and we were pleased to see that the design team had addressed our comments. I would like to thank the DDA staff and the design team for the open process they've used in soliciting citizen comments, their creativity, and their professionalism. I urge you to pass these resolutions approving these projects and look forward to the vitality these changes will bring to our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker today is Andy Burkhart.
Thank you. So I'm Andy Burkhart. I'm a resident of the 5th Ward. Go Fightin' 5th. I'm speaking today to you to urge you to support the People Friendly Streets project. There's been a lot of talk and debate, especially in the recent primary election about fixing the roads, and this is an opportunity to do just that and make these streets work for everyone. So like a lot of Ann Arbor residents, I'm a motorist, I'm a bicyclist, I'm a pedestrian all at different times. And I believe this project will help create streets that are welcoming for everyone. If you've driven on William or First and Ashley, they're not the most pleasant sections to be riding on. And this project would repair those sections so you don't have to weave around them on your bike, or you won't have to worry about car repairs if there's some rough sections there. As a regular bike commuter, I'm really excited about the prospect of protected bike lanes. I mean, I think in the words of Joe Biden, this is a big expletive deleted deal. I talk to a lot of folks just in terms of my bike commute, and they say they'd really love to do things like that, but they are scared to either bike next to cars or just go in the bike lane with cars zooming past them. And this would do a lot to increase safety and just be an amazing start to give other transportation options to folks who might want to be biking, especially for folks who are more vulnerable users. Finally, I think this project will go a long way to improve the quality of just walking downtown and make a more walkable downtown. There's improved street lightings, enhanced crosswalks where there's leading walk signals, so you're not going to get hit when someone's turning right and is not looking for you, and even the possibility of a street light on Huron and 3rd and Chapin. I think a lot of non-residents and even residents get confused sometimes by that hawk signal, and I think this would be really helpful for, especially folks like the kids at the Y. So to sum up, I would urge you to vote in favor of fixing the roads, making them work for everyone, and doing this by supporting the People Friendly Streets project. I thank you for listening to me, and thank you all for your service.
Thank you. Our next speaker today is Craig Steffen.
Hi, I am Craig Steffen. I've been a resident of Ann Arbor for 30 years. I'm an avid cyclist and commute around Ann Arbor almost exclusively by bicycle, summer and winter. I log over 2,000 miles every year. I'm going to be talking about this project strictly from a bicyclist point of view. I'm also 4 days away from my 75th birthday, have a bad back, and don't have the reflexes and bendable body of a 25-year-old. I've talked with many non-bicycle commuters, and by far the #1 reason they give for not commuting by bike is safety, and I really can't blame them. Make no mistake, I would like to see the proposed project implemented. I have some concerns about a protected bike lane with no escape path in case of road hazards, given Ann Arbor's record of road maintenance, but I think it would be an experiment worth trying. However, until the roads in Ann Arbor in general are brought up to safe conditions for cyclists, I think we should be spending money on fixing them before we spend it on new infrastructure. Road hazards that are only a nuisance to motorists can be bone-jarring or deadly to a cyclist. Yet the edges of roads where cyclists must travel are often in the worst shape. When I ride on First and Ashley Streets or Miller Road, as I did coming here, or any of many other streets in Ann Arbor, it's not the fact that they are one-way or don't have protected bike lanes that frightens me. It's that I can't use safely the bike lanes that are there. Like other cyclists, I have the choice of riding over potholes, cracks, and gravel in the bike lane, or suddenly dodging out into traffic to avoid them. I had the opportunity recently to bicycle in Boulder, Colorado. I was impressed with their bicycle infrastructure, but I was even more impressed that both their bicycle paths and their roads are in good shape. Boulder is similar to Ann Arbor in many ways and has the same freeze-thaw cycles. Why can they maintain safe conditions for cyclists and we can't? I've been told that the DDA can't spend money on maintenance and that funding for this project versus spending money on maintaining roads is not an either-or proposition. I maintain that it is. While the money may come from different pockets, those pockets are ultimately filled from the same pocket, the pocket of taxpayers. I'm all for resurfacing First and Ashley streets. They clearly need it, and it will make them safer, restriping them for two-way traffic. Perhaps it's too late for this project, but in the future, I say do repair work like that and don't spend limited funds on new infrastructure until we fixed our current. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Dilip Das.
Hi, thank you for having me here today. Three quick things. First, I want to say thank you. Thank you for increasing the safety for pedestrians in Ann Arbor roads. It's very visible, and I think it's effective. I think it's calming car traffic. I've seen it. I cross 7th at Lutz every day, and I've seen that the cars screaming down 7th Street have abated, largely due to the barriers and the crosswalks. I think that's done a lot. And I have 2 kids, and I feel a lot better about them going across that street by themselves now, too. The second thank you I'd like to say is to Chuck, who has been an extremely responsive and proactive council person, and I wanted to say thank you. Second, I wanted to express my frustration and impatience at Ann Arbor and how far it's fallen compared to not only Boulder, but so many cities, not only across across the state, but also in Michigan, in terms of safe and accessible bike infrastructure. I don't know why that is, and I hope it changes, beginning with the support of the DDA plan, which I would be shocked if it did not pass. And I know that there would be significant resistance if it did not pass. So I surely hope that you do pass the DDA plan. It's forward-thinking. It's well thought out. There's a lot of input in it across the community. But I do hope that we come to some agreement that calming car traffic is the way forward. It's what people in this community want. We don't want cars to be the preeminent and predominant vehicle or transportation mode here. The movement is toward multimodal. That means calming car traffic. It means reducing speeds. It means sharing the road more assertively and more safely with barriers, protected barriers for bikes and traffic. It's the way we need to go, and we know it. We know that the car has to reduce we have to reduce the preeminence of cars in favor of pedestrians and bikes across the city. And the DDA plan is a good start. Finally, I want to say that my kids cannot travel downtown on bikes safely. They're terrified of traveling downtown. We tried to go to the neutral zone party where they blocked the streets off, and we had to get off and walk our bikes because they were terrified. They couldn't go on the sidewalk, too many people. They refused to go in the street because it's dangerous, and the ridiculous 5 feet ordinance doesn't leave enough room for 2 cars and 2 bikes or even 1 bike to pass through. So we desperately need a fix for downtown bike safety traffic, and it needs to happen soon. Kids are in danger. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Adam Goodman.
Good evening. I'm here, like many of my friends here, to speak in support and appreciation of the People-Friendly Streets project put forward by the DDA. I'm a resident of the 5th Ward, and I work at Duo Security. His offices are at 123 North Ashley and 130 South First. So I bike, walk, or drive on these streets basically every weekday, and that's been the case for several years. I would say, in their current state, they are definitely not people-friendly. The bike lanes where they exist are confusing, disjoint, full of potholes, and consistently blocked by delivery trucks. And walking across these streets can be a harrowing journey, especially at Ann and Ashley, right next to our office, where cars never stop at the crosswalk in spite of what the law says. More generally, in the 14 years I've been in Ann Arbor, It's been clear to me that we pride ourselves on being a bike and pedestrian-friendly community. But the truth is that we're at least 10 years behind our peer cities on building safe, modern, and connected infrastructure. We've painted some bike lanes on some roads, and that's nice, I appreciate it. But we've punted on the more difficult areas, and this has left significant gaps in our non-motorized transit network that are difficult and dangerous to navigate. We have 0 protected bike lanes in the city. Consider Detroit, the Motor City. In less than a decade, it's gone from also having 0 protected bike lanes to being among the top 5 cities in the United States for protected lane miles. I think we should find this contrast embarrassing. However, this People-Friendly Streets project was really a breath of fresh air for me. It was the first serious evidence that I've seen in a long time that Ann Arbor may yet have the will to be a truly great city for biking and walking. I'm very much looking forward to seeing these changes implemented and seeing them as the first step in making a more connected network for non-motorized, for all road users, really, in the city. And finally, I wanted to say that I really appreciated the amount of time and thought that clearly went into the public engagement on this project. If I'm not mistaken, it was something like 2 solid weeks of public engagement sessions at a variety of different venues in a variety of different formats. And that's not counting direct meetings with stakeholders, as with 111 North Ashley, and also for us at Duo Security. So thank you, and please keep up the good work.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Ray Detter.
My name is Ray Detter, and I'm a person who lives downtown. I'm also chair of the Downtown Area Citizens Advisory Council. And during the years recently passed, the CAC for the downtown area has been pleased to be a part of the recreation of the South University and Carytown streetscapes. Most recently, some of us have participated in the many opportunities to provide input in the Safe Streets workshop effort to recreate Ashley and First into two-way streets, William Street into a bicycle route from State to 3rd, and the redesign of Huron from 3rd to Division. At our July meeting, Citizens Advisory Council members and our guests were pleased to have DDA Director Susan Pale and Capital Projects Manager Amber Miller, as well as representatives from Smith Group, JJ&R, provide a visual presentation of these Safe Street proposed changes for downtown. In an hour and a half, there was plenty of time for questions, input, and discussion. Everyone present was convinced that we should strongly support the DDA resolution in favor of these changes. On First and Ashley, restore two-way traffic, add protected bike lanes, and improve pedestrian amenities. On William Street from State to 3rd, develop an east-west protected bike lane. All of this with the intention of eventually connecting to the tree line. And on Huron Street from Division to Chapin, improve pedestrian amenities, including lighting, landscape, that's trees, enhanced crosswalks, improved and safer traffic organization, and non-rush hour on-street parking. We had unanimous agreement of all those present that these changes are going to be transformative benefit to our downtown. The CAC champions projects that prioritize pedestrian safety and comfort and advance the city of Ann Arbor and DDA's commitment to Vision Zero, particularly in the downtown. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Stephen Cronenberg.
Hi there, and thank you for this opportunity. I want to express my gratitude to everyone that's spoken before me, and I certainly heartily endorse all that they've said. I think it's clear to say that build it and they will come. I am a resident of the Fifth Ward. I'm a parent and been a year-round bicycle commuter to campus for 15 years. Last fall, I quit riding entirely. I've had so many hundreds of close calls over the years that it finally just got to be too much, and now I run. I still face issues every time I go through a crosswalk. I can count on vehicles not yielding to me, but it's not the same as being in the street at all times. I've also had to recently curtail my daughter's newfound freedom biking to her swim practice because vehicles were not stopping for her in those hawk signal crosswalks. I want to talk about some things that you may not necessarily associate with bicycle and pedestrian safety, but that they include time, privilege, addiction, enforcement, and unity. First, with time, the conventional wisdom is to make big changes gradually. We've created these traffic problems in less than a generation. And when you read some of the latest research about Hot House Earth series, when we talked about keeping climate change to within 2 degrees centigrade, we've now recognized that that's already a runaway scenario where the Earth, the systems that absorb carbon dioxide will now produce carbon dioxide. And so we can't count on that. So we have to turn the tide against not the problems that we're facing, but the problems that we will face. Insofar as privilege is concerned, everyone understands that everyone used to understand that public roads were for the public. But now, over the years, we've become so brainwashed by various interests that everyone knows now that the roads are for cars, and interlopers, like cyclists and pedestrians, don't know their place. If you want to see an expression of implicit bias, just start to talk to anyone about pedestrian and bicycle safety, and when they respond immediately, have you seen how bicycles, cyclists, and pedestrians break the law too? That's the first sign that they carry that implicit bias, and our police, many of our police, are in that category. And so, bigger vehicles don't have more rights, and aggression with a motor vehicle ought to be seen for what it is: assault with a deadly weapon. Addiction is really what we crave most is bad for us, and both individually and collectively. So denial is enabling addiction. Giving addicts what they want is cruel. Now, I have seen this denial to the extent where we have faculty doing research on the U of M campus who are incredulous that the federal government doesn't believe the reports on climate change, and yet they drive to work in SUVs alone. All right, I'll have to go through the rest later. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Kathleen Stroud.
Good evening. Thank you. This will be the third time, I believe, that I have addressed you all on this same issue, and it is roundabouts. 7 roundabouts, actually, within 1 mile on Nixon Road in a residential area. Now, I represent the residents. I've been here, I've been a resident for 49 years. I'm even older than the other people who have spoken. And we do not need 7 roundabouts within 1 mile on Nixon Road. There was a problem identified that people could not get out of their apartment complexes onto Nixon Road. I believe we need to address this problem. We've over-addressed it. I don't know why, but I'm asking you, Mayor Taylor, I wanted to ask Howard, City Administrator, to instruct the staff, the Planning Commission, not the commission, but the staff, to come up with a plan that is only 3 roundabouts in 1 mile instead of 7. And I have a whole minute and 46 seconds, but I'm going to devote that to your guys' lives. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there communications today from council? Councilmember Warpahowski.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. I just want to inform my colleagues and the public that I will be absent at the next meeting. When I was scheduling my family vacation, I neglected to take into consideration the Islamic holiday that's taking place later this month, and will unfortunately be absent at the next council meeting.
Further communication, Councilmember Kalasapathy.
Yeah, we continue to receive queries and concerns from residents, especially those who live and work in Ward 1, regarding the status of the Ann Arbor Community Center. Council member and Bannister and I raised this issue at council, I believe, in the last council meeting as well. The Ann Arbor Community Center has been sold. The information that we have at this point is that that land was donated to the Ann Arbor Community Center for $1. in 1957, and now it has been sold to a private company. And right now, Mr. Larry Kestenbaum of the county clerk's office is doing a deed search. So those of you who have been calling me and writing to us and leaving messages, we will let you know, hopefully in the next council meeting during council communications, what we have found. Specifically, many residents have wanted to know whether there were any deed restrictions placed on this land that was given by the county to the Ann Arbor Community Center, and why it has been sold to a private party. So we are at it, and the deed search is going on. As soon as we know, we will let you know. Thank you.
Further communication from council? I'd like to request confirmation of the following appointment that was presented at the July 16, 2018 regular session to the Downtown Development Authority, Tyler Kinley. May I have a motion, please? Moved by Councilmember Smith, seconded by Councilmember Ackerman. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? It is approved. I'd like to recommend the following nominations for your consideration: to the Ann Arbor Area Transportation Authority, Eric Mahler; to the Building Board of Appeals, Paul Darling; and to the Transportation Commission, Molly Kleinman. May I have a motion, please, to approve the consent agenda? Moved by Councilmember Grand, seconded by Councilmember Lum. Discussion, please, of the consent agenda. Councilmember Kalasapathy.
Yes, I would like to pull out consent agenda items. I would like to pull out consent agenda items CA 25 and CA 26, please.
Perhaps we'll consider them immediately after the consent agenda, if that's all right.
Thank you.
Councilmember Grand.
No need to pull anything out. I just want to express my appreciation to all of the members of the Park Advisory Commission and staff who worked to put the park's millage renewal on the ballot this fall. So it's just a straight up renewal, and critically important, especially as we look to our aging infrastructure in the parks, to make sure that we take care of those assets. And also to express my congratulations to staff for getting the $300,000 from the Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund grant for the Allen Creek Railroad berm opening. Really excited about that project.
Further, Councilmember Lum.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No need to pull them out, but I'd just like to mention that there are two items, CA6 and CA7, from the Liquor License Review Committee. CA6 is to recommend to the MLCC they approve a downtown development district license for La Taqueria LLC at 106 East Liberty. This would be a Class C license, which is beer, wine, and liquor. And the applicant has met all the requirements, including investing at least $75,000 in the facility. The second item, CA7, is to approve a microbrewer and small winemaker license for Townies Brewery LLC at 2350 West Liberty. They are also requesting a dance entertainment permit. Staff have no objections to these licenses, and the Liquor License Review Committee recommends your approval. Thank you.
Further discussion of the consent agenda? As modified, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The consent agenda, with the exception of CA 25 and 26, is approved with 10 council members present, all voting in the affirmative, thus satisfying the 8-vote requirement with respect to CA 1, CA 2, CA 3, CA 4, CA 5. And CA 23. Pardon me, and thank you, and with all members have voted in the affirmative with 10 council members present, thus satisfying the 7-vote requirement with respect to CA 11. CA 25, resolution to approve restoration of two-way traffic on First and Ashley Streets, moved by Council Member Ackerman, seconded by Councilmember Grand. Discussion of CA 25.
Yeah, can we have somebody from the DDA to talk about this issue? Okay, so my question is regarding the bonds that are going to be floated. They're not revenue bonds, correct? Because these are for infrastructure.
Yeah, we're going to be using the city's full faith and
So,
credit.
so it'll be in the, how much is the value of the total bonds?
The bonds will be 15.5 million.
Do we have to float all the bonds together? Can this, because that's some of the questions that we have been fielding from residents is there are really excellent elements to this plan. Some are not as much of a priority that can wait. And some people want to see phased out implementation. Is there a need that we have to float the 15 million at one go and do it as a single project, or can this be, let's say, just round number, phased out into 3 phases of $5 million according to priority? I mean, we can deal with like the low-hanging fruits that can be done easily, right?
Maybe if I understood a little bit more, can you explain what it is that you're looking to phase, or what it is? I don't understand.
Yeah, but $15 million is a lot of money, and that's one of the questions people have been raising when there are multiple competing interests in the city and downtown. Does this all have to go at one go? So when we are floating the bonds, are you going to, is it a phased bond issue, or is it going to be, I just would like to know.
Well, the expenditure, once the bond is issued, the expenditures will take place over 3, almost 4 years. So maybe if I understood more about what is an area of concern, but the projects themselves will take many years to implement.
But the bonds themselves are going to be floated at a single point.
It'll be a single bond, that's right. That's what's proposed, yeah.
Yeah, so because we have been fielding question, at least in the Ward 1, about I mean, I know we had a budget amendment to fix roads, and there was $4.5 million additional dollars to fix the roads, and that seemed like, when we were discussing with staff, it was considered a huge amount of money. And now, to have 15 million at one go. And also, I mean, maybe a little later I'll go into the details. I mean, a couple of downtown business people have emailed us asking about, like, this is capital expenditure, for example, planting trees, that the city plants trees and then walks away, and then Main Street Biz and all the other organizations have to pick up the slack and take care of it. And that's another question. I mean, this is an initial capital expense, but there is nowhere are we speaking about maintenance of those issues.
So with trees, maybe I'll speak to that actually more positively. A few years ago, when we saw a lot of our street trees were in distress and actually dying, we all sought partnerships to help us, all of us, manage those trees. And the Biz stepped up and have been a wonderful partner to the city, to the DDA, to the community, taking really excellent care of the trees downtown. Part of what we all do when we receive street trees in our neighborhoods is we ask the neighbors to help keep those trees watered. The Biz has done that in downtown, and we're very grateful to them. We also have the State Street Area Association and the South U Association also partners with us. So what's great about it is the involvement and the investment from our community into their own downtown. It's actually a wonderful thing to have the Biz in place to help us with this.
And then there was another question regarding pavers that initially we had put some pavers 20 years ago, and now that manufacturer doesn't make that size pavers, so city finds it difficult to match those. So if you are going to be putting pavers and then putting trees, the tree roots get bigger, and then the pavers start getting uneven and becomes a hazard. And so that was another question about putting pavers. Is it trees and pavers, do they actually go together, or is it intrinsically problematic putting those together?
That's an excellent question. And with your permission, we've brought all the members of our technical team, including our designers. May I ask them up to speak?
Of course, please.
So with that, I'm going to ask Bob Doyle from Smith Group to maybe help us respond.
Thank you.
Good evening, council members. I'm Bob Doyle with the firm of Smith Group on Depot Street here in Ann Arbor. To go back to add to Susan's response to your earlier question about tree maintenance. In response to wanting the trees to grow up and get a great start in a healthy way, the DDA has now started including 3 years of warranty and maintenance on all new landscape, which is beyond and above the typical 1-year warranty that happens. So the idea is to make sure that those trees do have a great start. With regard to trees and pavers, there is, some displacement of pavers when tree roots grow up and the pavers are not managed correctly and the trees are not installed per current best practices. So on projects moving forward, we're using best practices to make sure that the trees are planted lower into the ground. We're also using a base underneath the pavers, for instance, what's happening now in the Carytown area where we have a concrete base under the pavers so that the pavers don't just lift because they're on a sand bed.
Councilor Kalasapati, still the floor. Further discussion of CAA 25. Councilor Lum.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So as we all know, we have these two significant transportation-related proposals from the DDA tonight, and thanks to the DDA and Smith Group and others for being here, and to the folks who came out to speak to address these proposals. On this item, CA 25, which is, we've heard, is to convert both First and Ashley to two-way streets, including a protected bikeway on First. The second agenda item, CA 26, is to reduce Huron Street to one travel lane in each direction during non-rush hour periods by permitting parking on Huron. I support the First and Ashley proposal. And I will just say that I understand as well that the full cost of the project is $17 million, and because you have to put down 15% of the construction costs in cash, as you indicated, you need to borrow 15.5, and after funding, as you indicated, again, 15% of the project costs. So I understand that, and I appreciate that helpful explanation. I am not supporting the Huron Street proposal, and I will speak to that a bit later because that's coming up next. But I do want to thank the city and the DDA for the opportunity to review the proposals in detail at the council work session on June 11th. These are significant changes, and taking that time was appropriate and appreciated. Each of these proposals tonight includes streetscape and aesthetic improvements, and obviously those are positives. In terms of making First and Ashley two-way streets and creating a bikeway on First, I believe those changes make sense. Ann Arbor has a lot of one-way streets, probably too many. And as we've learned, these two-way streets were made one-way back in the 1960s when they were envisioned as a downtown bypass. And that, of course, never happened. And I agree that the benefits of changing the streets to two-way outweigh the negatives of slightly higher travel times resulting from just one lane of travel each way. The DDA's plan also includes changes for William Street, but those are not part of this agenda tonight. The changes there are to create a protected bikeway on William, and I do support those changes as well. So anyway, I'll be supporting these recommendations for First and Ashley tonight, but not the proposal we'll be considering next for Huron. Thank you.
Further discussion of CA 25. Councilmember Wojciechowski.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. I just want to say thank you so much. I'm very excited about the project, the changes that are proposed here. They are incredible. I'm also extremely, extremely impressed by the quality of community involvement and outreach that the project team, both the local team and the outside consultants did. It was incredible. When I read through the 160-page document of the community outreach, it was just mind-blowing in its thoroughness. For me, one, it's great work. Two, I think some of the lessons I take from just the quality of the process is that sometimes it does it is worth the investment to bring in outside eyes and assistance to do this. The quality of the interaction with the tool design team during the charrettes was above and beyond what I see our staff having the capacity to support, just because they've got so much on their plate. It's not a knock on them. So I really value bringing in those outside experiences, and also people who have experience doing this in other communities. And then the third thing, just to recognize, is that that was incredible design work for a project of this scale, as Councilmember Lum said. I think it was absolutely appropriate. I think those of us on council and those of us on the community need, just in terms of level setting, need to also understand that that was a very significant investment in staff time and in dollars to have that very in-depth process. So I'm all for that kind of investment, but we also need to know it does come with a trade-off. But thank you. I'm so excited about riding these streets. I'm so excited about these improvements. I think you did a great job with this. Thank you.
Councilmember Smith.
You know, first, let me start by reminding everybody that I work for a company called Wade Trim. We provide an individual who advises the DDA on some infrastructure issues. Chris Wall, who's here this evening. I just want to be very clear about that. I am, like my colleague Chuck just said, I'm really excited. I really think that the outreach done to talk to stakeholders and residents here has been outstanding. And it has come at a significant monetary cost, but I think on a project like this, it's very important to engage the community that way. For folks, Ms. Pauley, maybe just for folks watching at home, could you kind of break down, I mean, they're gonna say, one of the questions you get is, well, this is just changing the streets. Could you talk about some of the other underground infrastructure work that will be happening as part of this project?
With your indulgence, I'm going to bring up my colleague, Amber Miller. She is our capital improvements manager and can speak, I think, with more specificity.
Great, thank you.
Hello. Yes, I can speak to this. So as Susan mentioned earlier, the bulk of this project really is on repairing old infrastructure. So most of what we're doing is replacing sidewalk. We're resurfacing portions of First Ashley and William, adding new landscaping, new lighting, bump outs, and safety improvements at the intersections. We are also, while we're in the streets, we're going to be doing some water main replacement and upsizing, and some stormwater improvements as well. So the bulk of the project cost is going to those infrastructure improvements. And then we will also be adding the protected bikeway, which surprisingly is not a high dollar figure. It's just a little over $700,000. So it's not the bulk of the project, but it certainly will have a huge impact.
Thank you. I just wanted to make that point for people watching, that this is what you have to do to take care of aging infrastructure. And, you know, we have these issues all over the city, and in our most important centers of commerce, the heart of our town, this is where we really need to be paying attention to it. The last point I want to make about this is, you know, when I sat on the Transportation Commission and the Speed Reduction Subcommittee put out a set of recommendations earlier this spring, you know, I'm looking at the first recommendation, which is dedicated funding and staffing. You know, doing these projects takes money, and we have to be committed to taking that step and investing in our infrastructure. This is taking care of what we got. I don't view this as creating something new. It's simply making what we've got usable for everybody. But as we talk about safety and we talk about our goal of Vision Zero that we have adopted here in Ann Arbor, I just want to point out that on this stretch of these two one-way pairs, you know, 40% of cars, that's 3,400 a day, are speeding through this corridor. That's a huge number. Over 100 a day are going more than 40 miles an hour. And this is significant because when you talk about a crash between a car and a vulnerable user, either a bicycle or a pedestrian, 9 out of 10 vulnerable users survive a crash at 20 miles an hour. At 40 miles an hour, only 1 out of 10 survives. This is a huge safety factor. This, to me, is about actually putting our money where our mouth is and implementing some of the things that get us towards that Vision Zero. Thanks.
Councilmember Grant.
Thank you. Councilmember Smith just beat me to a couple of points that I was going to make about 70% of this being below ground infrastructure improvements. And that's true for all of the projects that are in front of us, both at CA25 and CA26. It really is about making some of these improvements. This was based on a recommendation from the Transportation Committee, and that's what we ask these committees to do. And it really does have the ability to save lives by slowing cars down. I guess the final point I'd like to make is that this is also an economic development tool as well, because as we slow people down, as we make these streets more pedestrian friendly, we hear a lot of concerns about the changing landscape of our downtown and not being able to support enough local businesses. But as we make more of these streets pedestrian friendly, Huron, First, Ashley, that provides the ability for more local businesses to really flourish, because you'll have more people walking on them and biking on them. So I do see this as primarily infrastructure for all users, safety for all users, and also economic development.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to reiterate the compliment that this outreach process was really well done. Protected bike lanes are a first for us, and that's a big deal. And I think by virtue of how you approach the public engagement, as we've heard from some of the neighbors, you inadvertently made converts out of many skeptics. So I think that speaks volumes. And as was referenced about this being a restoration, not a conversion, certainly city planning had a few dark decades back in the day when the enthusiasm for moving cars really quickly had some really unintended side effects. And I think we will, because of this work, reap the rewards of converting it to streets that we know from other experience in other cities that people are safer, the stores do better, and folks are just happier walking along them. So I appreciate all the work that's gone into it.
Further discussion? I'm very excited that this project is moving forward as well. I appreciate and I'm terribly grateful for the hard work that has gone on with respect to the actual design and the engagement process leading, complementing that design and leading to what I believe is a consensus support for this CA25 and ultimately CA26 from certainly anyone who's communicated to council as a whole. I would say too that I think that I'm particularly appreciative of the work that's that is going to be going into these two areas of our downtown. The downtown belongs to all of us. It's shared by all of us. It is the core of the city. It supports the neighborhoods. It improves the quality of life of people throughout the community. Being able to access the downtown with greater safety by cycle or by foot, being able to walk around the city, move throughout the city with greater safety, and as Councilmember Westfall said, just flat out happiness is a social good, and I'm glad that we're going to be moving forward with it. CA25, further discussion. Councilmember Benster.
Hi, I just wanted to sort of follow up on Councilmember Kalasapathy's question about the 17 million and how much of the 70% is underground on it and not actually more of the bike friendly and Vision Zero piece of it.
So nearly all, as my colleague was describing, of the construction, more than 77% is for repair of infrastructure, and the only portion that's the bikeway is $700,000. The other portion is almost $12 million. So the significance is more toward the infrastructure, considerably more.
Okay.
Excuse me. Yes,
Can
of
you
course.
just kind of give us a rough breakdown of what that is going to be? Is it like
Sure.
water and sewer?
So as we're looking at First Ashley and William and Huron, which we're going to be working on as well, we're looking at more than $1 million for resurfacing on First Ashley William. We're looking at intersection, including signal improvements of over $2 million. We are looking at curb and sidewalk. Altogether, have, I think about $4.5 million on Huron and approximately $2 million on those other streets. We are looking at water main upsizing. Excuse me, I'm misreading my own notes. The total for all of them is about $4.5 million for sidewalk improvements. The water mains, we're estimating it to be $900,000. Other utilities, $536,000. We are looking for, as I said, the bikeways for $720,000. We're also going to be doing some improvements at the railroad crossing. For some of us who are down at First, you know that that area also needs to be addressed. And then all the mobilization, all of that is another $1.5 million. And if it's of interest, I can send this to council after tonight. You can see the spreadsheet that we've developed.
So did I understand right? Did you say 70% was underground infrastructure?
77% is infrastructure, but that includes the bikeway. The bikeway is $700,000 of that,
Okay,
of the
because
construction.
you said the water mains is about 900,000 and other utilities is about $500,000, right? That
That's right.
comes to about 1.4 million, so not 70%.
So we were including resurfacing, we were including the sidewalks that also need attention, and the streetlights also as infrastructure. So it may be not specific to underground, but speaking to infrastructure.
Infrastructure, okay, thank you.
Further discussion of CA 25? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? It is approved. CA 26, resolution to support Huron Street transportation improvements, moved by Councilmember Ackerman, seconded by Councilmember Orbachowski. Discussion, please, of CA 26. Councilor Lum.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. There are aspects of this proposal that I certainly support, such as the efforts to improve the streetscape aesthetics of Huron and adding a full traffic signal at Chapin 3rd. I believe the core piece of this proposal, which is to reduce Huron Street from 2 to 1 vehicle travel lane in each direction during non-rush hour periods by permitting parking on Huron, is ill-advised. Huron is one of Ann Arbor's major corridors. It's a business route for I-94 and US 23. The traffic volumes are heavy, including large truck traffic. Recognizing those heavy volumes, the proposal here is not to reduce the travel lanes all the time, but just during rush hour. But when you look at the actual traffic data, you'll see the volumes are not just heavy in rush hour periods, they're heavy midday. I believe allowing parking on Huron midday and reducing 2 vehicle travel lanes in each direction to just 1 will result in significantly more congestion. The primary purpose of this change is to improve safety, and obviously that's appropriate, but I'm concerned that more congestion adds to drivers' frustration and increases the probability they'll look for alternate routes through neighborhoods on streets not intended to handle the volumes. Those behaviors can present safety risks. We've been told this won't have a significant impact on travel times, but I have to say I'm skeptical about that. I share the concerns that have been raised about the 2 to 1 lane funnels that will be created, about real-world experience and problems there's been with even small temporary lane closures on business days, about likely tie-ups as folks enter and leave these newly created parking spaces. I also believe that with this on-off parking proposal, okay to park at night, not okay to park in the morning rush, okay to park midday, not okay to park in the afternoon rush, the practical result is that we'll constantly have parked cars on Huron at those times we don't want them. I brought this up at the work session, and it was acknowledged that prompt, consistent towing is absolutely necessary. And I question whether we'll really do that. I suspect we'll hear that if this doesn't work, we can always go back to do what we do now. But I seriously doubt that that would ever happen, and would also note that whenever I've asked for follow-up data on road diets, I get crash data, but no travel data on delays or data on traffic diverted to neighborhoods. We haven't been collecting that kind of data. I suspect we'll hear again that in terms of the unintended consequences that caused by traffic perhaps being diverted to other neighborhoods, and this backup that the easy fix is just to go back and do some restriping, take out the parking spots. But again, our experience indicates that that we don't do those kinds of things. We don't revisit these areas where we remove lanes, these streets. Many downtown streets are excellent candidates for people-friendly street treatments like this, but I just don't think that Huron is that kind of candidate. It's the major east-west corridor, and so for these reasons, I will not be supporting C26 tonight. But again, I would like to thank the DDA and everyone associated with this for all their hard work. They did excellent stakeholder outreach, and all that feedback was greatly appreciated. So thank you.
Further discussion? Councilmember Warbachowski.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. Following on Councilmember Lum's comments, I've heard from MDOT that they are in the process of doing a review of the 4-3 conversion at Jackson west of the Dexter split. Do you know what the criteria you would be using to evaluate the success of these changes would be? And what the evaluation framework, I think it's good to know what we're looking for before we start interpreting the data. So what would you be looking for to evaluate the success or failure of this conversion?
So I'm asking a member of our team, Chris Walt, if you could help us try to answer that question.
Sure. Chris Wall, Wade Trim. So from a traffic perspective, we'll be watching the congestion, the queuing. We'll also be looking at the level of service and how vehicles navigate through the intersections. We'll also look at generally the travel time from one end of the corridor to the other end. Our modeling expects that the time is going to be relatively a minor increase of seconds per block as we coordinate with MDOT on this, and we can review the implementation. We'll assess to see if that's actually true. And the understanding is that the corridor would operate at a function well, given the non-peak time for where we have the on-street parking. And so, coordinating with MDOT, we would look at the level of service measures and other traffic measures of effectiveness. I guess there is one other component too, and that's the crash data. If FHWA road diet tells us that we should anticipate crash reduction during that time of about 19 to 47%, and that's because of the side swipes with the vehicles adjacent, where it is very common in a 2-lane road environment that you would have that. So we would also look towards seeing that if we actually in fact have a reduction in crashes.
So similar to how MDOT is going through a review of their Jackson Road conversion over by Dexter, there would be an MDOT or DDA, would there be an active review of this to ensure that the road is functioning as modeled and that the levels of service remain adequate?
So we're seeking the permission to actually sit down with MDOT and work through this process, that next step. They want to see that the city is in favor of this and encourages us to work with them on that. So that detail would have to be worked out, but most likely a component of like a follow-up study would probably be a requirement with MDOT.
So you mentioned the net crash reduction, and I'm just adding up the the crash reduction piece, and you have 59% for this, 14% for that, 3% for that, it gets to around 80 or 90% if you add them up. So I'm assuming you can't, that it doesn't work that way.
No, it's based on the crash type.
Okay.
So, for example, the 19 to 47%, or I think in our document we have 29% fewer side swipe crashes. So that would be a reduction of about 29% of those types of crashes. Like I said, FHWA road diet actually says it could range from 19 to 47%. Okay. For improving the signal timing for pedestrians and actually providing a pedestrian lead interval, that factor is 59% reduction of pedestrian crashes.
Okay, so the summary that's in our packet is they're not of all the other. There's a level of detail that's in your analysis that that's not in here. So I guess where I'm leading with this is a sense of where the tension comes here is the question between, you know, I think the only part of this that's controversial is the off-peak parking. I hope I'm not speaking out of turn there. And so the question is, what is the singular impact of that change on both travel time? You know, if you back that piece out, how does that affect the net crash reduction? How does that affect the net travel time?
So are you asking like the impacts, the benefits, the drawbacks of
right, if we
having
just to back that
on-street
single
parking?
piece out, how does that affect the?
So during the non-motorized, or I'm sorry, the non-peak hour time when there would be parking on the road,
right.
Like I said, the FHWA would suggest that we could see a decrease in side swipe type crashes by 19 to 47%. If we kept it as 2 lanes, we would not see that reduction.
Okay.
That's one. The other factor.
So then because the signal timing and the right turn on red are reducing other types of crashes, they are actually independent variables. And likewise, the left turn on red, that's affecting a different type of crash. So we'd still get that 19 to 47% reduction in side swipe collisions. And because that's operating independently, the other types of collisions that the other treatments are mitigating for.
Yes, that's exactly correct. The other component I was going to speak to was speed on the corridor. So the speed data that we collected on this corridor, we have about 12% of traffic is always speeding on Huron at any given time. 66% of that speeding traffic actually occurs during the non-rush hour times. So the implementation of having the on-street parking during those times actually helps generate a slower through traffic speed on that through the corridor. So as probably a lot of us have heard about, the lower the speed, if you have a crash, the severity of that crash is lower, so probably less vehicle damage, less injuries to passengers, definitely less severity of injury to pedestrian or bicyclists.
So I guess that's, you know, for me as I'm looking at all these measures, the one that matters most to me is the incident rate for vulnerable user crashes, particularly those involving injury. I guess all injury involving, but especially the vulnerable user crashes. So from my perspective, what I'm hearing from you is that and please do correct me if I'm mischaracterizing your words, but that the reduction in speed from the off-peak parking would reduce the likely severity of vulnerable user crashes and therefore the likeliness of injury, hospitalization, or death for vulnerable user crashes during those off-peak parking hours.
That's correct.
Thank you. I think for me, we had a car pedestrian crash in the 5th Ward over the spring, and it was a situation where there was not, it was not driver error based on the police report, but from my perspective, the design speed of the road, the driver was going at the speed limit. The driver was going 35 miles an hour, and if we had built a road for 25 miles an hour, we had built a road and the driver was going that speed, I think the pedestrian would have survived. So if we're able to bring those actual travel speeds down and ideally reduce the incidents, but certainly reduce the fatality or the danger of these vulnerable user crashes. I'm sorry, that sounds like jargon. I'm dehumanizing people. It's like cars hitting people who are walking and cars hitting people who are bicycling. If we make it safer for the people who are walking and the people who are biking, and it takes us a couple seconds for a block, that is a trade-off that I think is appropriate. And I do appreciate the way that the design team nuanced to say that during off-peak hours we can make this work, but during peak hours the volumes are such that it doesn't. That is a trade-off in favor of travel time over the risk for those people who are walking and people who are biking. And given the volumes, it's probably a trade-off we need to make at this point. But I think for these off-peak hours, I think it's worth doing, especially knowing that, based on my experiences with MDOT, they're going to require us to go back and make sure that the level of service is still functioning, that we're seeing still adequate travel throughput, that we are seeing those crash reduction results. So thank you. I'll be supporting the measure.
Councilmember Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, I didn't get the opportunity on the last piece of the agenda to compliment the public engagement process, but it was thorough and involved. And I had the pleasure of getting to go to 2 public meetings and then a transportation commission meeting. And so I've heard this all quite a few times now. It's been interesting, the pattern that's developed throughout each of these conversations. 2 amongst the public in 2 different venues, 1 amongst a body of citizen volunteers who make up experts in transportation safety, be they traffic engineers themselves, representatives from A2 Safe Transit, or transportation business owners. And the conversations do keep kind of following the same pattern. There's the agreement that all of these recommendations are great and make common sense. And then the brief hesitation about the reducing the lanes with off-peak parking. And I appreciate that. It's different. It's nothing we've done before, almost. And Ms. Pillay, have we deployed temporary lane reductions in the downtown? Fifth and Beeks comes to mind. Can you tell us a little bit about why a temporary installation was put there to reduce lanes, what analysis occurred, and then what the decision was to remove that potential lane reduction?
I'm going to bring up some of my colleagues to help fill in my gaps, but we were looking at the street. We had done our traffic analysis that allowed us to see that Fifth Avenue could actually function as a 1-lane street. There are 2 there today, and what we were looking to see was what actually would happen if we reduced it. And one of the most significant things that we saw in the analysis was the astonishing number of people that actually started to stop for pedestrians. One of the biggest challenges that I think we're looking to manage and overcome are these double threat streets, and Huron is one of them. Fifth Avenue is another one. When you've got 2 lanes side by side, the pedestrian feeling safe begins to walk out into the street. It's the second lane where the car driver doesn't see them. So we wanted to understand if, in fact, for pedestrian safety, we should go all the way and make it a 1-lane street. And from there, I'm going to turn to our traffic engineer. Thanks.
And just to build upon that there was a very stark contrast between how it currently exists as a 2-lane. When we narrowed it down to 1 lane, all of a sudden people were paying attention to the one person crossing the road. And I think it was because they were just out there in the traffic and people were aware and they saw the signs that said you would have to stop for pedestrian. The other, we wanted to test that. We wanted to test to see what the impacts would be. Given the dynamic of those crossings, we also saw a reduction in speed. We saw the traffic kind of calm, but we also saw additional queuing. And so given that test and coordinating with the city staff, we felt that what we could glean from that was we wanted to definitely highly emphasize the road crossings for the pedestrians, but we wanted to generally keep the road functioning similar to the way it was before in terms of throughput. So out of that pilot, we found a balance that seemed to satisfy a lot of the criteria that we're looking to solve.
Thank you, and I appreciate that, and appreciate that the DDA has a learning approach where if they're going to install a change, they're going to reevaluate. And if it's not working the way that we intend it to, we have the possibility to go back, and the DDA has a track record of doing that analysis and reevaluating and acting on that reevaluation. So that lessens any concerns there. The conversation with the Transportation Commission was interesting, though. It didn't take the turn that I expected it to, and that some of the conversation had done previously at the 2 citizen engagement meetings. But instead, the Transportation Commission's concern was, why isn't this off-peak parking ban being extended further? Why can't we include this region to go towards all the way to Thayer? Because as a lot of people know who travel down Huron, there's a crosswalk at Huron and Thayer that's heavily used by young adults throughout the day, no matter the time of day. And it's a dangerous crosswalk, and there was hope that if we could extend this zone, we might even, potentially save more lives or prevent more injury. So if this passes, and as we do evaluate and reassess, I hope we would also keep an eye to, is this working beyond what we expected it to, and can we learn from it and extend it elsewhere? So I'll be glad to support this. Like I said, I think the conversation amongst the citizen meetings, amongst the citizen volunteers at the Transportation Commission has all been exceedingly positive, with some hesitations about the logistics of the off-peak parking. But I believe that the DDA and the technical team have a keen eye for how to evaluate this on an ongoing basis, and I trust them too. So I'll enthusiastically support this. I think it's a lot of terrific improvements just to the infrastructure that exists today, to the streetscape and beauty of our downtown, to the viability of retail on Huron as another true downtown street and not just a thoroughfare. And the fact that when you look at the traffic data or the crash data throughout downtown Huron is the scariest. That all of the scariest crashes are happening on Huron. And so I'll be glad to support this moving forward.
Councilmember Kalasapathy.
Thank you. Mr. Wall, can you answer the question for me, please? Sure. Yeah. So you mentioned the Fifth Avenue experiment you guys did for lane reduction. So similarly, you're going to do the off-street parking for the Huron, right? So is it possible, I know you keep repeating it's going to be a few seconds delay. I have to be honest with you. I mean, I hear most people are very skeptical when I say that it's going to be just a couple of seconds. You won't even notice the delays when you, I'll be very honest, people are just like laughing. I mean, she's shaking her head because we have been having these meetings. And so is it possible to do a similar experiment? I mean, putting, I mean, whatever methods you want to use to see whether it's really seconds, or is there some basis for resident skepticism of lane reduction?
Mm-hmm. So you're asking if like a demonstration project or a way to test that in the field?
Yeah, and to the timing. I mean, these are huge $1 million projects,
Mm-hmm.
and I know you guys have done such a great job with like community reach, reaching out to the community and getting together. And I think we have a hypothesis, and testing the hypothesis is okay, right? Before we start implementing $1 million projects, because that's my question. Because you said we need to pass this resolution in order for you to sit down with the MDOT and actually test the numbers. I was thinking I would like to see it the reverse way around. I mean, you actually sit down with them and get the numbers and then come to council. I mean, I would feel much more comfortable knowing the delays, because, I mean, to be honest, that's the biggest concern that I have heard about this whole project is the off-peak hour lane reduction, and we are going to have them as parking, off-street parking. So is it possible to test this hypothesis that it's going to be just a couple of second delay and?
Well, there probably are ways to test it in some manner. I would have to review with the DDA, but also with the city and MDOT to see what type of project or demonstration like that could actually be implemented. So I guess that's the short, quick answer is there probably is a way to do a test in the field. What we rely on as traffic engineers, this is simulation.
Simulation, they see
Right.
that's the
Yep.
thing, we are doing simulations, right? I mean, so,
Right, and so that's the basis of our feeling pretty confident that the congestion that we would see in the eastbound direction during that midday peak is pretty minimal. The westbound is where we would see a little bit more increase, but not enough to back up into the adjacent roads. So that's why I feel very confident that going to MDOT and talking through this process and talking about establishing this process with them, we feel comfortable moving forward with those discussions.
so we are just basically going to go with whatever the simulation tells us, not actually doing a demonstrative,
A demonstration.
project, yeah.
I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, but that's,
Yeah, some of what we're about to do is to actually develop the details of this. So a simulation where we don't yet know what the signage is, we don't yet have sort of the structural pieces in place. It was a little different on Fifth because a lot of those pieces are already in place. To do a simulation would involve almost all the work to actually create the actual plan itself. And I'm not sure until we had those details that MDOT would even allow us to do the simulation, frankly.
even demonstration.
The demonstration. That would be my concern, is to actually develop it to that kind of level of detail that they would allow us to do it. We've effectively.
Oh, so MDOT would prohibit you
I'm not
from-
sure that they would allow us.
But you haven't asked.
We have not
You
asked
don't-
that question.
Yeah, exactly.
No, we have not asked.
But I mean, this is my own personal baggage or hang-up I have. Within the first couple of months of me coming to city council almost 6 years ago, there was a $2 million project. I think it was a wind turbine, and this is the kind of a situation I was saying, simulation and all that, we were going to put it, and the staff said we were going to lose the money, so we had to just vote on it, and I voted on it, and that was one of my biggest regrets, because then these professors were writing to us saying that the wind turbine wasn't going to even move because it wasn't even in the wind direction. And so simulations can say something, but there are also concrete realities of life. And then that project didn't go through because of the school didn't want it there because it wasn't going to work. So, I just don't want to make the same kind of a mistake again. So I would be more comfortable actually knowing something actually works on the streets, not just on my computer screen. So, thank you.
Councilmember Eden.
I'd like to offer one clarification. Bob Doyle again. In terms of the budget for the Huron project, only a very small part of that budget is actually related to expenses for having on-street or testing the on-street parking. 98% of that budget is actually in streetscape improvements. It's replacing the sidewalks, which are crumbling, replacing the curb as necessary, putting in street lights because the current lighting levels are inadequate, et cetera. So just as a matter of clarification.
So are you basically trying to tell me that there's no funding to do this?
No, what I'm saying is there's very little cost involved to implement it.
Oh, yes.
Right. It's a very small.
There's no infrastructural.
Right. There's some signs, and that's
So
about it.
basically, if it doesn't work, you just don't have off-street parking.
Right.
During.
Right.
If, let's say, delays aren't seconds, but maybe real backlog or something like that.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Thank
The
you.
disassembly of it is very minimal.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councilmember Eaton.
Thank you. I want to thank Councilmember Lum for expressing legitimate concerns about the allowing parking intermittently on Huron Street. I share those concerns. However, the other elements of this plan I think are important enough and attractive enough that I'll be supporting this. I especially like the fact that we're going to change the hawk light to a actual traffic signal at Chapin and 3rd. I like the idea of putting in a turn arrow at Division, at 5th, I'm sorry. I think these are important improvements, and for that reason, and the fact that I'm reassured that MDOT will come back and evaluate the impact of the on-street parking, I'll be supporting this evening. And I appreciate everything that the DDA has done on this plan.
Councilmember Warpahowski.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. Following up on Councilmember Ackerman's discussion of pedestrian safety outside of the project area, I want to offer an amendment to this. Added a whereas the Jackson-Huron corridor lacks an adequate density of safe pedestrian crossings outside the project area. That would be the last whereas. And added resolved that City Council requests that MDOT explore improved pedestrian safety infrastructure throughout the Jackson-Huron corridor, including Hawk RFB, I wrote P, please correct that in the record, or other pedestrian activated signals in the vicinity of Veterans Memorial Park, Urbana, and at Rackham Auditorium. So I move that amendment.
Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Smith.
So the background on this is I'm told that there was a council resolution requesting that MDOT look at pedestrian crossings at the Urbana and Vets Park area sections back in the 80s. I've been unable to unearth that resolution. As long as we're talking to MDOT about the corridor and as long as we're talking to MDOT about pedestrian safety, these are 3 areas that have come up in my conversations with residents as high-risk crossings. As Councilmember Ackerman said, there are a lot of people who cross at the Thayer intersection over by Rackham. Vets Pool, during the summer, I see families crossing, and there it is still 4 lanes, so dashing across the 4 lanes to try to get to the pool regularly during the summer. And Urbana over by the Salvation Army, it's just a long block. It's a long stretch between the Dexter light and the 7th light without a safe crossing. And there's, now there's bus stops on both sides. So particularly for bus users, if you're dropped off on one side but you live on the other, it's a long haul before there's a safe crossing. And so most people are just dashing across. So this is a chance to memorialize council support for looking at pedestrian safety along that corridor and to make sure that it's formally on the record that we are asking MDOT to review, 1, to support these changes, and 2, to review pedestrian safety infrastructure along the entire corridor.
Is this friendly to the body? Councilor Reed?
While I support everything that Councilmember Warpahowski just said, I think it's well beyond the scope of this particular project. This is well outside the DDA area. It's well outside any of the study that they've conducted, any of the input. I think those are all very important improvements. I heard from those same residents that that area needs significant attention. I don't believe that it's appropriate to attach it to this particular resolution.
Councilmember Smith.
I'm wondering if there's a way to figure out how to make sure that we're utilizing these conversations with MDOT effectively. I think that that's what we're trying, that's the intent of the resolution, is to make sure that as long as we're in the same room, we're bringing everything up that impacts that corridor. If this needs to be a separate resolution, I think that would be fine, but the experience of working with MDOT is often a frustrating one, and I feel that it's in our best interest in the city to try and take advantage of their engineers when we have them sitting down looking at our city to bring up the other issues. So at least for my 2 cents worth, I'm happy to break these 2 issues out, but to provide the direction that when we're all sitting down, we want these other crossings brought up in that discussion.
Councilmember Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I appreciate Councilmember Smith's idea. I would just point out that the piece about Rackham Auditorium does, I think, more immediately fit within this scope, and I would not want to see that sacrifice if that's something council's interested in, because I think it has the potential of protecting a lot of people.
Are there any, let me start, are there any staff cautions with respect to the inclusion of this? I think my inference is that council as a whole would be delighted to have this conversation occur between staff, DDA as appropriate, and MDOT. Are there staff cautions with respect to the inclusions of this resolution here?
The only caution that we would provide is that we don't have that data. So I think we would need some additional partnership with the city to collect that data and have those conversations. The initial conversations that we've had so far, we've talked with the university. They are interested in seeing improvements in that corridor. And I think in some other discussions, there's been some ideas floated, like relocating the Hawk signal to that intersection, but we're missing the data piece to make a proposal to the state.
Perhaps Councilman Malone? Oh. Ms. Giupi?
What council is expressing is a desire we've had. We have engaged MDOT from time to time, reminding them that they were going to study that area of Jackson after the conversion so that we could look at putting in pedestrian crossings. Whether it's part of a separate resolution or this resolution, just having council say that that is their desire will help us focus MDOT on the issue.
Councilor Lum.
So given that, it sounds like it's okay to incorporate that here, Mr. Huppy, just to clarify that for us all?
Yes,
If this would be helpful.
understanding that your inclusion of it is not tapping the DDA for funding of it.
Right, right. And if I may, just, and I appreciate the amendment language that that Councilmember Warpechowski provided us. In terms of the crosswalk at Rackham, when I leave here tonight, I'm going to drive through there. I'm constantly reminded, it's also very dark, and it's not safe. And so for MDOT to look at that, if we could also, I don't know, Mr. Huppy, lighting at some of these areas along Huron, is that solely the city's responsibility, or is that something MDOT can also take a look at and help us with?
The lighting in the corridor is the city's. The lighting in the intersection is tied, and I'm looking at Nick as I say this, the lighting at the intersection is tied to the signals in MDOT.
Okay, so then the lighting at the Rackham crosswalk is our responsibility, and that's one that, area where it'd be very nice if the university would work with us on that. And so I'm not going to propose to amend this to request MDOT to also look at, I was just going to insert that too as another infrastructure improvement. But I'm just calling that out because it's something I think we do need to address, so thanks. But I've heard all the comments, of course, and I guess I'm going to be the Lone Ranger. My concern again is that I'm just not convinced that the delays by doing this won't be significant during, the midday and early afternoon time frame from noon to about 3:30, and because these traffic volumes midday are heavy, the data shows, and again, obviously not as much as AM and PM rush hour peaks, but it's still very heavy, and so I just don't think that, it states in here that the intent is to quote-unquote manage, Huron to quote accommodate peak traffic demand. And I'm sorry, I just don't believe that that's realistic, given the volumes that we know exist there. And, but again, I think the efforts to improve the streetscape and the aesthetics, it's not attractive now. Adding a bit of parking would be a positive, but I'm concerned about this, potentially adverse impact on congestion. And I appreciate that we're going to be studying here, Jackson, and Beth's going to, collect some data on that. And so we'll have that kind of post-mortem data, but I haven't heard that we look at the impacts on the greater network, the side streets. And I know after we did do the road diet there, I've heard similar things about Platt, Stadium, now Maple, heard this anecdotally, that from residents and observers that vehicles, are taking side streets because, just to find a way, if they're sitting in traffic, an easier, faster way through. So that's the kind of data also I think is important to collect. So thanks.
May I suggest that we're done on the amendment?
Oh, sorry.
No worries. All in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
All opposed? The amendment is approved. Further discussion of the main motion, I have Councilmember Westphal and Councilmember Smith. Perhaps we're coming to the end of this conversation. Councilmember Westphal.
Thank you. Could I have Mr. Wall come back up, please, for some questions? This was about the whole science of what you've analyzed so far. So from my understanding, there's been pretty extensive, what would you characterize that as, modeling being done for traffic flows and the side street spacing and the daily traffic volume and so on. Is that what you've been looking at?
Yeah, so we've collected intersection turning movement counts for the peak hours as well as the off-peak time. We've collected 80 average daily traffic tube counts along the corridor. We've reviewed crash data for 4 years. We've reviewed MDOT historical traffic data, ADT, as well as turning movement counts. And and we've taken that and put it into different models, and we've coordinated with the city on those.
And this type of, I guess, temporary conversion has been done in other cities. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, Bob could probably speak to a lot of the conversions that have been.
My point in asking is, do the results from those activities get fed into the models that you all use, or any case studies from other cities?
The case studies, we use the case studies as a guide and a reference to see if there's any possible issues with our analysis, but also to see if there's any issues that those other communities experience, so we can kind of anticipate and think through those in this application.
And do many of these studies kind of reflect the pre and post what you'd expect? What I'm thinking is a lot of these models are tested afterwards, and what you're using is reflective of things that have happened in other communities.
Yeah. I mean, this is the state of the practice for traffic engineering, is to use these tools. It's the best tools we have. It's a nationally recognized process, and so it's not like a new terrain here. This is very reliable, and it's the tools that traffic engineers use.
Great. Okay. Thank you for that. So I appreciate the disciplined approach, and that you've looked at sort of the do-nothing scenario as well as a more aggressive scenario. And as has been pointed out, several things contribute to crashes, but what we do know is that the number one ingredient for serious injury and death is car speed, and clearly one person's delay in getting to where they need to go in their car does directly translate to another person's prevented injury. So for me, I use this corridor a lot. I see demonstration projects all the time when a UPS truck or FedEx truck is parked outside of the hotel there. And anecdotally to me, it doesn't seem to be too bad, even though it's frustrating when you're not expecting it. So I assume that the adjustment process for this will be rough, but for a few seconds, I think people's lives are worth it. And I think the streetscape will also be vastly different in a few years, given how much more pleasant it'll be to walk along. So thank you.
Councilmember Smith.
I will cede my time.
Further discussion? Councilmember Master.
Yes. I had a question for CA 25 and CA 26. What do we know the cost breakout for CA 26?
So for CA 26, it's the traffic changes. So the cost for like the signage and that kind of thing. Okay.
And the crosswalks and
Crosswalks.
the crosswalks on here.
Hi. We don't know, we still need to work with MDOT on the types of signage that they would find appropriate and acceptable, but I would put a price tag of about $20,000 in terms of signs and meter posts. So it's very, given the overall scope of the construction project, it's quite small.
Oh, very small, okay. And I had a question too then about emergency vehicles. So if we've shrunk put the road on a diet and then emergency vehicles need to go speeding through, is that a checkbox on some of the things that would be discussed with MDOT?
It is indeed. Yeah, there is a list of things that need to be worked through. We've had meetings with MDOT to have some preliminary discussions. We've also had meetings with public safety people here in Ann Arbor about that, and businesses along the corridor. We have a running list of things that need to be discussed and worked through, and it includes that one exactly.
Okay.
Councilman Kasa?
Yeah, excuse me, can you just answer one more question? Yeah, again, I'm coming back to the same issue of off-street parking and lane reduction, because this is what I just keep hearing again and again, so I'm just pretty nervous about this issue. So is there some sort of a feedback loop mechanism built into this lane reduction on Huron that MDOT is going to evaluate it pre and post implementation and see if there are hiccups or unacceptable delays or issues that are going to come up? Do they have a threshold beyond which it's not acceptable and they revert back? Is there that feedback loop mechanism? Because that, for me, gives me some sort of a security, because I see the positive aspects of it, timing, light timing, and turning signals and crosswalk enhancements. I'm really happy we are doing all that, but this one issue is just really making me really nervous, so I'll be very honest.
Yes. As Mr. Wall suggested earlier, we are quite certain that a feedback loop will be built into any agreement with MDOT to move this project forward. Should
Not
they?
at the modeling stage, sir. After implementation.
Correct. And that's one of the things in the case studies that we have looked at. One of the things that's quite important is that there is, first of all, a very strong and proactive education campaign.
Okay.
And secondly, that there is an active and ongoing monitoring of the proposal, so that you can be ensured, fine-tune it if necessary, or undo it if necessary.
So it just takes a resolution, right? At
Right.
council, like, let's say in February, it's just unacceptable what's going on. We hear from a lot of residents.
Yes.
And we need to undo it. Just take 6 votes, resolution,
And
we
I think
undo it.
that your input on that issue
Okay.
will be taken to heart and taken to our discussions with MDOT.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Further discussion? Roll call vote, please, starting with Councilmember Grant.
Councilmember Grant?
Yes.
Councilmember Ackerman?
Yes.
Mayor Taylor?
Yes.
Councilmember Eaton?
Yes.
Councilmember Warpahowski?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Kalasapati?
Yes.
Councilmember Bannister?
Yes.
Councilmember Westfall?
Yes.
Councilmember Lum?
No.
Motion carries.
We now come to a set of public hearings. Public hearings are opportunities for members of the public to speak to council and the community about specific items on our agenda. To speak at a public hearing, you need not have signed up in advance, but your speech must relate to the specific subject of the public hearing. Speakers have 3 minutes in which to speak, so please pay close attention to the time clock. As a matter of courtesy, we may have only one person speaking at a time. And finally, if you require assistance in speaking before council, we'd be delighted to provide it to you. We now have public hearing number 1, an ordinance to amend Chapter 55, zoning, rezoning of .41 acres from R4B multifamily dwelling district to O office district, 2455 South Main rezoning. Is there anyone who would like to speak at this public hearing? Seeing no one, this public hearing is closed. Public hearing number 2, resolution to approve 115 Research Drive site plan, 115 Research Drive. Is there anyone who would like to speak at this public hearing? Seeing no one, this public hearing is closed. A1, we now have before us the regular session minutes of July 16, 2018. May I have a motion, please, to approve the minutes? Moved by Councilmember Ackerman, seconded by Councilmember Lum. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The minutes are approved. B1, an ordinance to amend Chapter 55, zoning, rezoning of .41 acres from R4B multifamily dwelling district to O office district, 2455 South Main rezoning. Moved by Councilmember Ackerman, seconded by Councilmember Grand. Discussion of B1. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? It is approved. C1, an ordinance to amend Section 1207 of Chapter 8, Organization of Boards and Commissions, and to repeal Chapter 85, Taxi Cabs of the Code of the City of Ann Arbor. Moved by Councilmember Ackerman, seconded by Councilmember Westfall. Discussion, please, of C1. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? It is approved. C2, an ordinance to amend the zoning map being a part of Section 510.2 of Chapter 55 of Title 5 of the Code of the City of Ann Arbor, zoning of 6.4 acres from C1AR Campus Business Residential District with conditions to C1AR with conditions as amended. 1140 Broadway rezoning. Moved by Councilmember Ackerman, seconded by Councilmember Westfall. Discussion, please, of C2. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? It is approved. DC1, resolution to appoint Stephen Brown to the Environmental Commission. Moved by Councilmember Smith, seconded by Councilmember Bannister. Discussion, please, of DC1. Councilmember Ackerman.
I'll just say Mr. Brown was narrowly defeated in a precinct delegate race against my mother on Tuesday, but I'm glad that he'll be able to serve the city and his community in this capacity.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? It is approved. DC2, resolution in support of the Michigan Civil Rights Commission. Moved by Councilmember Warpahowski, seconded by Councilmember Grand. Discussion, please, of DC2. Councilmember Warpahowski.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. As most of you are in the room are probably aware, the state Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act protects against discrimination for a number of protected classes, but it does not, its language does not explicitly protect people against discrimination based on gender identity or sexual orientation. It does protect against discrimination based on sex. There is currently a dispute between the members of the Civil Rights Commission and the Attorney's General Office as to whether or not a broad reading of discrimination based on sex is inclusive of gender identity and sexual orientation. This resolution would say, we want an expansive reading of that language, and we want the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act to be revised so that it explicitly protects based on those protected statuses. And our voters and our residents believe, broadly, not all of us, but most of us, believe that people should be free from the threat of losing their job, losing their housing, being denied an education, being denied service based on their gender identity, whom they love, any of those things. And it's time that the state catches up with the times and protects all of our residents, including those who are gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgender.
Further discussion, please, of DC2. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? It's approved. DC3, Resolution for Community Events Fund Disbursements from the fiscal year 19 budget. Moved by Councilmember Grand, seconded by Councilmember Bannister. Discussion, please, of DC3. Councilmember Grand.
Quick thank you to Sarah Higgins, who does the bulk of this work, setting up the process, reviewing applications, and coming up with a fair distribution. We were able to include a few new groups this year. That did mean a slight reduction, but my hope is with the new Community Events Task Force that's going to be looking at how we can reduce some of those costs for community events in terms of security barriers, et cetera, that will more than offset once that process is complete.
Further discussion of DC3. Councilmember Lund.
Just simply, I'd like to thank Councilmember Grand and Councilmember Bannister for your work on this. Thanks.
Further discussion. All in favor? Oh, sorry. Councilmember Bannister? No. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? It's approved. DC4, resolution requesting Governor Snyder to sign new emergency rule 19 to enable existing medical marijuana facilities in Ann Arbor to continue to operate beyond September 15, 2018 without having obtained a state operating license. Moved by Councilmember Bannister, seconded by Councilmember Kalasapathy. Discussion, please, of DC4. Councilmember Kalasapathy?
Yeah, I believe at the state level, over 400 applications were submitted, and the last count I saw, only 6 have been approved, so there is a huge bottleneck right now, and several dispensary owners have contacted us wanting to function legally. So this is the only way in which the city could accommodate those dispensaries to function till the bottleneck in the licensing process is resolved, if resolved.
Further discussion? Councilmember Lund.
Yeah, thanks. I would just note that, we're really just grandfathering the ones that, that exist today, and due to the backup at the state level, that's why this is before us. And I would also just share that, and this will come up at our meeting on the 23rd, when we have the second reading of the ordinance regarding, the amendments for distances and other school-like facilities, that there is a group out there, primarily a group of pediatricians that we've heard from regarding medical marijuana facilities in general. And I've heard from some when this popped up that there are concerns about, or they've articulated an interest in, because of these concerns, that we should have, and I think I've sent an email about maybe a work session about this, but a public forum or forming a committee to address just this whole issue on a more holistic level, if you will. Again, to address some of these concerns that have been brought to our attention. So just food for thought as we go forward.
Further discussion? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? It is approved. DB1, resolution to approve 115 Research Drive Site Plan. Moved by Councilmember Lum, seconded by Councilmember Westfall. Discussion, please, of DB1. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? It is approved. DS1, resolution authorizing publication of notice of intent to issue general obligation capital improvement bonds to fund Downtown Development Authority project not to exceed $15,500,000. Moved by Councilmember Warpechowski, seconded by Councilmember Smith. Discussion, please, of DS1. Roll call vote, please, starting with Councilmember Brand.
Councilmember Grand?
Yes.
Councilmember Ackerman?
Yes.
Mayor Taylor?
Yes.
Councilmember Eaton?
Yes.
Councilmember Warpechowski?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Kalasapati?
Yes.
Councilmember Bannister?
Yes.
Councilmember Westfall?
Yes.
Councilmember Lum?
Yes.
Motion carries.
It is, fair enough. Do we have communications today from our city attorney?
No, Mayor.
We have before us the clerk's report of communications, petitions, and referrals. May I have a motion, please, to approve the clerk's report? Moved by Councilmember Smith, seconded by Councilmember Lum. Discussion, please. Councilmember Bannister.
Well, I had something off track. I was backing up to DC 1 when the Environmental Commission, where we were appointing Stephen Brown. I was pretty sure, and perhaps I'm mistaken, but I thought that I was a co-sponsor on that from way back. Maybe possibly
Thank you.
at the July 16 meeting.
Absolutely. Further discussion of the clerk's report?
Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The clerk's report is approved. We now come to public comment general time. Public comment general time is an opportunity for members of the public to speak to council and the community about matters of municipal interest. To speak at public comment general time, one need not have signed up in advance. Speakers have 3 minutes in which to speak, so please pay close attention to the time clock. As a matter of courtesy, we may have only one person speaking at a time, and finally, if you require assistance in speaking before council, we'd be delighted to provide it to you. Is there anyone who'd like to speak at public comment?
Yes, my name is Edward Vilmetti. I'm a resident of Ann Arbor. I recently received, while I was on vacation in Alpena, which is a very nice place, on August the 2nd, a letter from the Office of the City Attorney. Since the City Attorney has not seen this letter, I will read it to you all. Notice to cease and desist. Dear Mr. Vilmetti, I represent the City of Ann Arbor. Thank you for notifying the City Attorney's Office that localwiki.org has published the city's seal in violation of the city's Code of Ordinances. By separate correspondence to localwiki.org, we are demanding that it cease and desist its violation. To the extent that you have control over the illicit content, we respectfully request that you remove it. Please let me know if you've any questions or concerns. And it's signed, sincerely, Matthew R. Rectine, Senior Assistant City Attorney. I have spoken with the mayor on this topic and don't need to burden council with that conversation. I have spoken briefly with the city attorney on this topic, and he indicated that he would review this letter this week. To the members of council who approved this ordinance, I think you made some mistakes. In particular, I think you made the mistake of not consulting case law before making a new ordinance. There are 2 cases that I was able to find as a non-attorney within a few minutes. One in the state of Virginia, the other in New Jersey, both federal cases, both finding for the plaintiff that their use of county seal in that case, in the course of reporting, or in this case for Local Wiki, it would be in the course of encyclopedic coverage of the city seal itself, was protected under the First Amendment. I believe it is in your power as a body to remedy this. I also believe, having read the ordinance, that it is in the power of the mayor to remedy this. And if you do so, I would like a copy on city-approved bond paper with the city seal in watermark and embossed with the official city seal. And I think that would bring everything to a satisfactory close. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a moment ago, I took a picture of you guys. It happened to have a city seal. I tweeted that. Did I just break the law? I don't think that's what you meant by that law. Or, I mean, not that, whatever you want to call it. I don't know law, legal terms. The point is that if he removes that seal from that, is it illegal for me to take a picture of the mayor sitting right there and put it on that website? I don't think that was the intention of your, the resolution you guys passed. And from what I read from it, yeah, the mayor can decide to let special cases happen. In this case, that is a educational website. I'd strongly recommend that you let it go through. Otherwise, that wasn't my main topic tonight, but that was an important one that came up. I did want to wish people congrats, and also sorry for leaving. But yeah, I saw Griswold and I also hear that, congrats to them. That I do believe strongly in wishing people congrats. But yeah, I'd fix that because I don't think that's what you meant by that resolution. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kathy Griswold. I'm here to represent the neighborhoods of Ann Arbor. They have been terribly excluded from improvements to pedestrian safety. I'm always happy when people are talking about pedestrian safety. However, the conversation tonight focused on one area, the DDA. It focused on making tremendous improvements and changes. Some of those changes really aren't progress. It's just the illusion of progress with a change. While I'm talking tonight for 3 minutes, that's about how long it takes a person when they see someone getting ready to get in their car to move, where there's parallel parking, to get in there. So they stop traffic, they wait for that person to get out, and then they back in. And older people, sometimes it takes even longer. So you can do all the modeling you want, but we need to take into account how long it takes someone to parallel park, and more importantly, we need to take into account that we have designed buildings, most recently, without adequate loading docks. We did that intentionally, we did that knowingly, and now we have FedEx, UPS, moving vans parked in the outside lane. If you put metered traffic there, those large trucks are going to park right on top of our crosswalk. So don't tell me that metered parking is going to improve safety for pedestrians, because it won't if we allow the trucks and the buses to park on our crosswalks, and we've continued to do that. I would like to see some leadership of this council, and I challenge you to bring all of our crosswalks up to minimum standards in 3 months. It is inexcusable. You talked tonight about the crosswalk on Huron at Thayer. That is poorly illuminated. Everyone knows it's poorly illuminated. It has a street light, and in the summer, it's way up in the trees. So why are we talking about doing a study and moving a hawk signal when we can't even light the crosswalk? Let's get the basics done first. We continue to have crosswalks, mid-block crosswalks, 2-lane crosswalks in traffic circles that do not have signs. The signs are missing. The markings have been worn off. Why do we have to put up with that? When I get on council, I don't want to micromanage, and I don't want to deal with all these minor details that just happen in most communities. And in Ann Arbor, we have to struggle and we have to beg for our neighborhoods to get these basic services. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak at public comment? Seeing no one, public comment is closed. Are there communications from council? Do we have a closed session today? No, Mayor. May I have a motion to adjourn, please? Moved by Councilor Westfall, second by Councilor Lum. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? We are adjourned.